You might need to, yeah, just nip up to okay the recording. And let me pin myself. So many things to remember in this day and age. Okay. So, we are going to be exploring in this, it's kind of like a class / workshop. We're going to be exploring life, death, and how I always say or explain to people, we're going to explore life and death and how an acceptance, a wholehearted acceptance of the latter, can help us to engage more fully with the former. So how an acceptance of the one fact in life, that we will all die, that death is a thing, can allow us to really rinse and get the most out of life. And that's what I'm hoping, my best hope for this workshop is that you can just get a little bit of that as well, because we are going to be talking about a topic that can be challenging for people. It can be difficult to explore the topic of death for all sorts of reasons. So as with any of the topics that we've explored over these past 3 days, if at any point it feels that it's bringing up feelings that are just difficult or that you don't particularly want to sit with this evening, then either grounding yourself with the breath or feel free to kind of pause and take a little step out. But if you're able to sit with the discomfort and just use this class, as I like to encourage everyone to do in my classes, use it as an experiment to just see how it feels to do things a little bit differently. We're going to be turning things upside down. We're going to be going to places that often in everyday life people just don't go to. Then I would love to have you all along for the ride. And hopefully we'll have a little bit of fun and a little bit of enjoyment along the way. So in your seated position, whatever's comfortable for you, whether that's cross-legged, whether that's kneeling, whether you want to start off on a chair if you feel that you've been sort of cross-legged or kneeling all weekend and you want to just sit comfortably on a chair or a sofa, then whatever you go with is grand. And after perhaps taking a nice, deep, steady breath in through the nose and out through the mouth, just closing your eyelids down or softening your gaze towards the floor. Allowing your breath to do its thing, like waves on an ocean. There is no way that a wave could be that we would agree that it's perfect, but each wave is perfect in its own right. So just allow your breath to be the same. Don't worry too much about the right or wrong way of breathing, but just allow your body to breathe itself. And what I wanted to do in this evening's class is just explore a few concepts, a few ideas, and a few thought experiments that various people before me have found really useful in allowing us to use the fact of death in order to get the most out of life. And the first thing that we're going to start with as we sit here, just breathing slowly and steadily, is what's called the soft belly meditation. The idea is that in developing a practice where, if nothing more, we just see if we can soften the muscles in our belly. Our jaw may still be a little bit tense, our fists might be slightly clenched, but see, if nothing more, if you can just experience how it feels to soften in your belly. Then you can start taking steps towards developing a soft-bellied practice to life. without clinging to or condemning the ever-changing process of being alive. So as you're sitting here, taking slow, steady breaths, allowing whatever thoughts and feelings arise to just come and go as they please. Just notice for a few moments how it feels to explore, even if it's challenging, softening in your belly. You might notice that you keep tensing, particularly as you're sitting upright. And again, let that be okay. The philosopher Alan Watts famously said, "The meaning of life is just to be alive." So for the next hour or so, try and imagine we live in a world where there are no mistakes, there is no perfect or imperfect, there's no right or wrong, but there is just what's right for you right now. And as you soften through your belly, and perhaps start to allow any thoughts, feelings, sensations that come up for you around the word death, just to enter your consciousness. But if you can, continue just to soften in the belly. I'll put some references in the chat at the end, but this was a technique developed by a man called Levine. And Levine worked with the dying for most of his career, both in palliative care and with people on death row. And he discovered that when people softened to the idea of death, when they knew it was inevitable, and when they knew that they had a set amount of time left, the quality of their life, more often than not, transformed dramatically. Their priorities changed. The things they chose to spend their time doing, the things they chose to stop doing, the people they chose to spend time with, all shifted quite definitively and dramatically. And so he wrote a brilliant book called A Year to Live, where he experimented for 1 year of his life with how it would be if he told himself, if he imagined that each day it was the final day of that month of his final year. He imagined that he had a year to live, and he just experimented with how it felt. And one of the first things that he developed as part of this practice was just softening one part of his body, his belly, when he sat and he contemplated the idea of death. Just softening and allowing that idea in. So just noticing what comes up for you, noticing with childlike curiosity if your belly starts to tense. And again, letting that be okay, but see if you can keep coming back to that soft-bellied practice. Because often we are frightened as humans of things that we believe can cause us harm in some way. We're frightened of things that we feel can cause us harm. So my question to you as we come into this practice is, is death actually one of those things? Because if something can't cause us harm, then what is there to be afraid of? Fear lacks presence and forces us to live in fight or flight rather than with both feet firmly in the moment. But as Lao Tzu says in the Tao Te Ching, if you believe that all things change, there is nothing you will try to hold on to. And if you are not afraid of dying, there is nothing you cannot achieve. Okay. So taking a few more deep, steady, grounding breaths here. Again, allowing whatever thoughts, feelings, memories that come up, allowing them just to come and go as they please, like water, like waves and like ripples. Trusting that maybe there is nothing to fear. And that in accepting and exploring the concept of death, we can find ways of living in the moment, in our lives, with both feet. Okay. And when you're ready, just wriggling your fingers and toes, keeping this grounding, steady breath, but just bringing yourself a little bit back into the moment, maybe feeling the sensation of your body against the ground that you're sitting on, maybe feeling the experience of your clothes against your skin, taking in any sounds in the room around you. And just flickering your eyes open, but keeping your gaze soft. As this topic can be quite discombobulating, what I wanted to do for this session is to just turn things upside down a little, as I said. Some of you, I know you're given the instructions, if you have a wall close by, to be near to it. So I will give you two options for all of the poses, or at least two options. One of them will be with your legs upside down against the wall, just to do things a bit differently. And one of them will be on the mat. There will be a mat version of the pose, so you won't miss out on any of them. But if you have a wall close by, we're going to start off in my favourite yin pose, which is waterfall. So to come into this pose and all of the wall poses, you're going to come and sit just flush against the wall with one side of your body up right against it. And just easing yourself back so that your head's resting on the mat. You're going to just, smoothly as you can, shuffle round so that your hips, your sit bones are as close to the wall as possible. Don't worry if there's a bit of a gap. And your legs are up against the wall. And our first pose is going to quite simply be just here, with our legs upright in waterfall. If you don't have a wall nearby, then you can do exactly the same pose, lying back on your mat. It helps if you have a pillow or a bolster or a cushion just underneath your sacrum, just to raise your hips a little bit off the ground. That makes you a bit more stable. But don't worry if you don't. You might feel a little wobble in the legs, but that's absolutely fine. Just go with it. And whichever variation you're doing, see if you can come back to that soft belly, that slow, steady breath. And what I wanted to do to guide us in this practice, we have 5 poses, and we are, for each one, going to look at one of the top 5 regrets of the dying. So an Australian woman who some of you may have heard of, called Bronnie Ware, wrote a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. She, similarly to Stephen Levine, spent much of her life working in palliative care with people who are in the last stages of their life. And through her conversations with them, through her chats and her discussions, she compiled a list of what she discovered were, on average, the top 5 regrets of people who were in the last days of their lives. Not for a morbid, sad, somber reason, but to share them with people who still had their lives ahead of them, however much, to see if they can use them to really rinse every drop out of that life. And the first regret: I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. So as you're lying here in a couple more minutes of this waterfall pose, exploring any sensations, both physical and emotional, that come up, I want you just to ask yourself, however gently or however deep you go into the question, what would you notice as you leave this 3-day retreat, as you leave this class and this weekend behind? What would you notice as you come into the rest of your week, your month, your life? If you really took on the courage to be true to yourself, and if you chose to stop living the life others expected of you, what would you notice? What small things would you keep the same? What small changes would you make? What would you say yes to? What would you say no to? Who would you choose to spend your time with? How would you dress? What would you eat? Go as deep as you want to. What would you notice if you had the courage to live a life true to yourself rather than that which others expected of you? Okay. Taking a few more deep, nourishing breaths here. Whether you're in the floor or the wall version. After your next exhalation, if you are against the wall, then you can just, I find, to ease, take a little break between these poses. They're all going to be against the wall. It can be comfortable just to tuck your knees into your chest, but maybe stay in position, stay against the wall rather than having to keep moving in and out. If you are on the mat, if you don't have a wall nearby, then just bringing your legs out long, coming into neutral for a moment or two. And one of the reasons that I love waterfall is because the release when you come out of the pose is so beautiful. Feeling your body doing its job, feeling the blood rushing back to the legs. And just like with life, sometimes the beauty of facing difficult concepts and emotions and going through difficult periods of time, periods of mourning, of sadness, of depression, of anxiety, of change. The beauty of life is that we can guarantee things will always change, things are always in flux, and often the release, the shift when we come out of those difficult periods of time can be so much more enjoyable and nourishing than if we'd always been in it. So just reveling in the sensations as you release from your waterfall pose. And slowly and steadily, if you're against the wall, we're going to come into butterfly pose, up against the wall. So nice and simple. You're going to bend through the knees, bring the soles of your feet together, and just allow your feet to come down kind of as far as they do, with gravity helping. You might find that your heels come quite close to your pelvis, quite far down the wall, but just put them wherever's comfortable. And if you're on the mat, coming into reclined butterfly pose, so lying on your back, bringing the soles of your feet together and allowing your knees just to fall out wide. If you have any knee injuries or trickiness, then you can place cushions underneath each knee just to prop them up and stabilize them. Otherwise, just trusting in your body, trusting in the power and the strength of the beautiful machine that is you, and just allowing your knees to fall either side, whichever variation you've come into. Seeing if you can come back to that soft-bellied practice. As you take slow, steady, deep breaths here. And we explore the second of the top 5 regrets of the dying, which is quite simply, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. It's a cliche, but often we will find ourselves saying to others, or even saying to ourselves, when I'm on my deathbed, I'm not going to look back and wish that I'd spent more hours in the office or longer answering those emails. But when we're in the here and now, in the heat of the moment, it can be so hard to hold on to the one true certainty that one day we will be in that position, that we will all die. And reminding ourselves that we won't thank ourselves if we look back and realize that we worked as hard as we possibly could. So in this second pose, in whichever variation of butterfly you've come into, this time just mulling over the question, what would you notice as you go into a new week? Whatever your working pattern is, what would you notice if you were truly embodying and wholeheartedly embracing the knowledge that when you are in the end of your days, you won't look back and wish you'd worked harder? What would you notice if you were embodying the regret and choosing to take action from this point forwards, that you'll wish you hadn't worked so hard? Using the breath to ground you. And at any point, should you choose, just allowing it to root you back in the moment. If you find your mind starting to race or wander, knowing that you are here, you are safe. And allowing any feelings that come up around the idea of death just to come and go as they please as you return to that soft-bellied practice. Just softening round the edges as you explore these concepts that can help you to rinse even more from your life. Okay. And taking 3 more deep breaths here. And then when you have taken your 3rd exhalation, if you're lying on the mat, just again bringing your legs out long to neutral. Taking any movements on the way that might feel useful. If you're against the wall, again you might choose to just bring your feet to rest against the wall, or you might choose to tuck your knees into your chest and just have a little rock from side to side, easing the lower back out. As you come back to the slow, steady, grounding breath. And maybe coming back to the idea, the thought experiment that we started with. One that can be so incredibly liberating if we can keep it in the forefront of our minds as often as possible as we go through life. The idea of living your life and living each day as if you had a year to live. How might it feel? What might you prioritize? What might you ditch completely? And what things, people, invitations, experiences, tastes, sounds and sights would you start saying yes to? That maybe, just maybe, you could start saying yes to from this point forwards. Okay. So we have 3 more poses to go. Our next one, the wall version, we're going to come into Dragonfly. So the wall version is simply bringing your legs out wide. You may choose to use your hands just to sort of prop them in place. As again, with gravity, it can be quite intense on the insides of your thighs. A beautiful deep stretch, but it can be quite intense. So bring them as wide as feels comfortable. And then potentially just using your hands to prop them in place. And if you're seated, maybe taking a pillow underneath your sit bones just to raise your hips up, bringing your legs out wide. And allowing yourself to either fold forward from the hips as far as you can before your upper back starts curving, and then with a softness in your legs and a looseness in your ankles, just like a ragdoll folding forwards here. Or if you have a bolster, which I don't, then you may choose to use it propped upright, propped up lengthways to rest your head on and come into the pose a little more gently. So whichever variation you've gone for, whether you're against the wall or whether you're in seated. Coming back to that soft belly meditation. Coming back to the grounding and guiding breath. Leaning into any discomfort. Again, the physical practice of yin can be so powerful and so analogous of the experience of facing the harsh, challenging, and difficult realities of life, such as death. Leaning into the discomfort, turning towards the difficulty, and dropping, letting go of the struggle. So as you do this with the physical sensations here, we'll also come back to our thought experiments and see if you can lean into any discomfort or any challenge that they may bring up in you, letting go of the struggle and trusting in your own ability to explore them in a way that's useful for you. As we come back to the third regret of the dying. I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. So this time, same question, but different ending. Asking yourself and just starting to explore, to engage with what small things you'd notice in your life, what would stay the same and what might change, what might people around you notice was different about you. From this point onwards, if you had the courage to truly start expressing your feelings, how might it feel? What might you say and do? Nice, using the breath to ground you. As you explore how it might feel, again, just as an experiment, to entertain the idea of taking in both hands the courage from this point onwards to fully express your feelings. Is there something big, something specific that you'd want to address? Or might it just be in the small day-to-day things of speaking your truth, of doing what you want to sometimes rather than always doing what other people want? Or maybe it would be as simple as when someone who you know asks, "How are you doing?" You might give them a longer and more considered answer than, "Oh yeah, I'm okay." Okay, my friends. Taking 3 more deep, steady breaths here. I think you've had long enough marinating in this stretch. And for those of you who are against the wall, for our final 2 poses, we're going to find our way onto the mat. So when you've taken your third and final exhalation, that's the word I'm looking for in this pose. If you are in seated, just finding your way into neutral, lying on your back. And if you're against the wall, moving particularly slowly as you ease your legs together, tucking your knees into your chest, and then either rolling to one side or twisting on your back as you support your spine. Push through the soles of your feet, your hips and your palms as you shuffle your way into neutral to join our friends who have been on the mat the whole time. And our final pose before we come into our Shavasana is going to be a nice gentle twist. So if you have a blanket and you want to get particularly snuggly, then you could do so now. But before we come into our final couple of poses, again, maybe placing one hand on your belly as you just come back to that soft-bellied meditation, knowing that if nothing more, if this is a concept that you're keen to develop a relationship with, keen to start an exploration of the concept of death, but it just feels too much or you don't know where to start, then one of the best places to start can simply be to sit with the idea of death, even with just the word death, and just see if you can soften your belly as you breathe and lean into the topic. Okay. And when you're ready, we're going to come into twisted roots. If the waterfall pose is my favourite, then this is easily by far my second favourite. So bringing the soles of your feet both onto the mat, knees bent, arms out wide or in a cactus position. And I'll give you a few variations. I'm sure you're pretty familiar with them by now. But the first option is to cross your right leg over your left, completely cross it like you're chilling out and sunbathing on the grass in the summer. Right leg crossed over left, and quite simply you're going to allow your knees to drop to the left hand side. If this feels too intense for you, then you can uncross your legs and just allow the knees to rest one on top of the other. And if it feels good and you want to go deeper, then you can just draw the knees up closer towards the chest. So the more you bend the knees, the more intense, the more you straighten the legs and uncross them, the lighter. Have an experiment with turning your head perhaps in the opposite direction of your knees. Maybe bringing your hands to rest softly on your stomach or your hips rather than having them out wide, if that feels good, if that feels nurturing right now. And the fourth in the top 5 regrets of the dying, as cited by Bronnie Ware in her book of the same name, is I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. This one needs little explanation. So maybe without even my need for asking a question around this, just use the next couple of minutes in our first side of Twisted Roots just to explore how that regret, as cited by people in the last days of their life, resonates with you and how it might impact on you going forwards from this point. If in embracing the idea of death, you're to start wholeheartedly living with both feet in life. I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. Using that breath as an anchor, if and when your thoughts start wandering, your mind starts racing, reminding yourself that this is what we are evolutionarily designed to do, to start ruminating on the past or wandering off into the future. So with kindness, with no shame or blame, just noticing, congratulating yourself from noticing and seeing if once again you can use this topic, this exploration of death, to root you in a soft-bellied, grounded practice of being wholeheartedly in the moment. And in a moment, we're going to ease slowly but smoothly from this pose, fairly swiftly into the other side. So not moving yet, but just perhaps in your mind's eye, exploring how it will feel to move as you bring your knees up, as you uncross your legs, as you cross them perhaps on the other side, and slowly engaging through the core, allow them to fall down to the opposite side. And when you're ready, on an inhalation, pushing through the feet, engaging through the core, as you slowly but surely bring your knees back to the center, uncross your legs, perhaps pausing here for a moment or two. Before, if you're choosing to cross your knees, crossing left over right. If not, keeping them uncrossed and dropping your knees down to the right hand side as you experiment with turning your head in different directions, as you bring your palms to rest wherever feels comfortable. As you perhaps have a little fidget or a shuffle, adjusting your clothing, making yourself as comfortable as possible. Because in a world that's full of challenges and uncertainties, what yin can be most beautiful for is reminding us that there's no point pushing ourselves any harder or any further outside of our comfort zone than we have to, but within the difficulties and the struggles and the challenges that life is riven with, softening around them as much as possible and making things as comfortable for ourselves as we can. Remembering that the meaning of life perhaps is just to be alive. And exploring, before we come to the end of this session, the fifth and final top regret as cited by Bronnie Ware of people in the last days of their lives. I wish that I had let myself be happier. I wish that I had let myself be happier. breathing into it, leaning into and just engaging with any discomfort. Allowing any emotions, thoughts or feelings to come and go as they please, as you ask yourself, in our final pose of this evening's practice, what would your life be like from this point onwards if you were to heed this fifth top regret of the dying, and you were to wholeheartedly and unashamedly live life, allowing yourself to be as happy as possible? What small shifts might you notice in your day-to-day existence? What music might you listen to on the radio? What time would you get up in the morning? What foods might you eat? What would you start and what would you stop doing as part of your mundane day-to-day routine? If you were to simply allow yourself to be happier. Coming back to that soft belly practice. Using the steady rhythmical flow of your breath to guide you. Trusting that the meaning of life is just to be alive, and that any point, any moment in your existence on this earth that you choose, you get to start taking steps in whatever direction the life you want to live is facing. Okay. 3 more deep, steady breaths in our second side of twisted roots. Allowing any feelings to come and go. Coming back to that soft belly practice. And slowly, when you're ready, easing your knees back to the center, and we're going to come into Shavasana, neutral puddle pose, whatever you want to call it. Taking your time to get here. Again, maybe adjusting your clothing, grabbing a blanket if you haven't done so already, and making yourself as comfortable as you possibly can. Maybe now, maybe this moment, this second in time, is when you're going to no longer stand for settling for second best, and you're going to take on board the fifth and final top regret of the dying. I wish I'd let myself be happier. And you're going to make a stand right now to just lie in this Shavasana, this ending relaxation, in whatever way makes you feel happiest. Once you've found yourself here, closing down the eyes if they're not already. In a moment, we're going to come into a rotation of consciousness. a guided relaxation. And in turn, following my voice as I name each part of the body, I want you to see if you can bring this softness that you've been exploring in the belly. If you can bring a sense of softness, of letting go, and of easing and relaxing into the idea of death and how death can allow us to get the most out of life. Seeing if you can bring that softness and that letting go to each part of the body as if it's melting down into the mat like butter on warm, freshly made toast. But first, just allowing the words of the following poem to wash over you, to land however they do. In summing up the topics we've been exploring, in how an acceptance, an acknowledgement of death can allow us to get the most out of life. Have you ever watched kids on a merry-go-round or listened to rain slapping the ground? Ever followed a butterfly's erratic flight or gazed at the sun fading into the night? You'd better slow down. Don't dance so fast. Time is short. The music won't last. Do you run through each day on the fly? When you ask, "How are you?" do you hear the reply? When the day is done, do you lie on your bed with the next 100 chores running through your head? You'd better slow down. Don't dance so fast. Time is short. The music won't last. Ever told your child, "We'll do it tomorrow," and in your haste, not seen their sorrow? Ever lost touch, let a friendship die, 'cause you never had time to call and say hi? You'd better slow down. Don't dance so fast. Time is short. The music won't last. When you run so fast to get somewhere, you miss half the fun of getting there. When you worry and hurry through your day, it's like an unopened gift thrown away. Life isn't a race. So take it slower. Hear the music before your song is over. And softening, leaning into whatever emotions, thoughts, feelings are coming up for you right now. Softening in your right hand, right arm, right shoulder, and the whole right side of your body. Your left palm, left arm, left shoulder, and the whole left side of your body. Softening and releasing in your right hip, right leg, and the sole of your right foot. Your left hip, left leg and the sole of your left foot. Softening in the crown of your head, your eyes and eyelids, cheeks, nose, mouth, lips and tongue. Softening your jaw and letting go in your neck and throat. And on your next exhalation, sighing out and softening down in your chest, your rib cage, your spine, and your belly. Knowing that at any moment you choose, you get to decide who writes the story of the rest of your life from this point forwards. Just wriggling your fingers and toes. But before you bring any bigger movement into the body, just taking a moment to reflect on the journey we've been on over the past hour. Choosing to take with it and maybe even jot down some notes, some ideas, some decisions that you wish to take forward into the rest of your life, whilst choosing to discard, to let go, to just release anything that perhaps wasn't helpful or didn't serve you. And when you're ready, just taking a stretch or some bigger movements. And in your own time, maybe keeping your eyes open, trusting in your body's ability to follow its instincts and do what it needs to do, even without looking. Just rolling onto one side. Pausing here for a moment or two. And then, in your own time, maybe even choosing to stay here, maybe even choosing to stay put and just marinate in these concepts a little longer, otherwise pushing through your palms, easing your way slowly up to seated. And placing, when you're there, your right palm followed by your left palm on your belly. I know very little about the art of Chinese medicine and acupressure, but I have been told by authority that placing your palms, right and then left, on your belly just about a centimetre or two below your navel can be incredibly grounding and calming, particularly when you're perhaps finding life a little bit overwhelming. So placing your hands here. And we'll finish off by taking 3 last delicious deep breaths in through the nose. And sighing out through the mouth. Maybe bringing a subtle smile to your lips if that feels good as you breathe in, feeling a sense of invigoration and hope for what lies ahead. And breathing out, letting go, releasing anything that no longer serves you, that you wish to leave behind on the rest of your journey through life. And one last deep breath in. breathing out, letting go, and flickering your eyes open. My friends, you are all done. Thank you so much for joining me for what I know can be potentially a challenging topic, but also I think quite an exciting and exhilarating one. If you would like, I have a few journaling questions which I'm going to pop in the chat, which if you wanted to, if you feel in that space now or would like to copy and paste them and take them with you, then you could do perhaps tomorrow or the next day. And they are, if I were in my last days looking back over my life, my top regret would be, the one thing I wouldn't regret is, the one dream I will be most glad I chased is, and the most important question for me, what 3 small things can I do this week, this coming week, to work towards chasing my dreams? Enjoy. Thank you so much for joining me. It has been an absolute pleasure to spend time with so many wonderful people, and we have a load more sessions, so do continue with us for the rest of this evening, and have a fabulous rest of your week and month and year, and hopefully see you again at the next International Summit.